All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. You guys read the title. We're gonna discuss Nancy Pelosi today and how much she's been enriching herself, her and her husband. They've been investing in the right places. You know, we're adding on to some of the stories that I discussed with Robbie Jaeger the last time he was here. We're gonna talk about the Justice Democrats. We're gonna talk about Fidelity. So we're gonna start by talking about this No Excuses PAC, which is a spin-off PAC co-founded by Zach Exley and Corbin Trent. Corbin Trent is also the former communications director for AOC. So this is the scooplet that Robbie posted, and he writes that the No Excuses PAC, who ran ads against Senator Manchin and Sinema earlier this year, has been warned by the FEC for failing to disclose their Q1 financials. And then the No Excuses PAC reported raising $9,000 in Q2, but started the period with $53,000. They seem to have raised around $29,000 in Q1, spending $39,000 at issue. Is the disclosure of to/from whom? They made an $11,000 ad buy on April 14th, but none in Q2, in which of the $29,000 they spent, Trent got 22.5 thousand. That's a lot. That's a big portion of that money. So yeah, joining me today to discuss all this is Robbie Jaeger. Robbie Jaeger, MCSC reporter. He's the political financial reporter. He's the go-to guy for that kind of stuff. Robbie, it's great to have you on, buddy. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Glad to be back. You know, it's been a while, so glad to see that you're doing well.
Yeah, man, I love having you on and updating people, you know, on what you've been researching on. You know, this stuff is important. You know, we really want to follow the money and understand how corrupt these politicians and all these people that control these politicians are. So yeah, you want to comment on, you know, what I just showed people about the No Excuses PAC and Corbin Trent. What can you tell us about that?
Okay, yeah. So let's start with, obviously, I'm the political finance reporter for MCSC Network, obviously, and I spend most of my time digging through the FEC numbers and stuff like that. And, look, over the course of time, when these new PACs are starting, they come across your radar. You're just like, okay, whether they're started by notable individuals sometimes, and sometimes it's about, just a shady organization that's spending money, a lot of money against certain individuals. It could vary as to why they pop up on the radar. But this one was obvious, right? Whenever two Justice Democrat co-founders, or at least one Justice Democrat co-founder in Zach Exley, and then, of course, AOC's former comms director, Corbin Trent, when they publicly announced that, hey, we're going to be starting this super PAC called No Excuses. Well, actually, technically, I believe it's a hybrid PAC. So it's a PAC / super PAC hybrid, which means it's got a separate account for, raising the unlimited amounts that you hear about with super PACs and buying ads and stuff, and then it's got a separate account that they raise donations that they can actually disperse to candidates. And the way that it works is that you can move assets from your donation account to the super PAC account, but you can't go back the other way. As far as I'm reading it right, that's the way that it works. But regardless of that, the intent of No Excuses PAC was to, and this is what they said, was to, basically run ads against Senators Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema because they weren't, obviously if they were obstructing the Democratic agenda or Biden's agenda or whatever it was, and even going so far as to say that they were going to be drafting primary challengers for the two senators. And of course, it got promoted as of course they did. Because super PACs are bad unless we do it, of course. And when they get promoted, and they were kind of it was kind of, people were writing stories about them, and they wound up raising about $92,000 in their first from February when they were conceived up until the end of April. Well, let's see. I'm sorry. Just the end of Q1, so April 30th, right? Or April 1st is when the new quarter starts. January. Yeah, I can't count. It's been a long day at work. But regardless of that, what brought it on my radar is that I usually get these notifications when these filings are made, and a couple of weeks ago when No Excuses PAC filed their Q2 or their mid-year report, I noticed that, hey, there's like half the numbers are missing, and it turns out that the FEC noticed as well, because as that that first tweet you showed was a a warning letter from the FEC telling Corbin Trent that basically, hey, you didn't disclose like half of your donors so far for the half year, and
Yeah.
don't. And it took them weeks to turn these reports back out, and when they did, um, the numbers are just kind of. I'm not going to say strange, because honestly, the reason why I feel like this is kind of a story is because, I mean, we accuse all these other groups of using PACs for profit, or something like that, and instead of actually doing what you say they're going to do with them. And look, I've reached out to Corbin Trent, or I've reached out to No Excuses PAC for a comment on a few of these things, and I haven't heard back. That may change, uh, but you say you're going to start a PAC to you know challenge Cinema and Mansion, and you initially spend $14,000 on ads in the first 3 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then after that, nothing. But the entire time, Corbin Trent's been paying himself $7,500 a month. This pack has been active since February, so you do the math. I mean, they raised about $101,000 from February to the end of June. They spent $14,000 on ads, and Corbin Trent made 37,500. That's more than twice the amount of money that they spent
Jeez.
on ads. Um, and they still have $33,000 in the bank as of June 30th. And here's the thing, too. I actually saw an article yesterday that was written near the end of July that was saying that, and quoting Corbin Trent in this article. I want to say it's in Politico. I'm sorry, I don't have it pulled up. Uh, but it was also, he was commenting on Cinema and saying that they were planning on running an ad blitz in August. Well, August has come and gone, and that I have seen no FEC notifications about ad buys or political ads come across the wire from No Excuses PAC. So it's safe to say that those ads didn't happen, right? And if they did happen, the only way that they could not report it, which even though it's coming from a super, I still don't know if how this rule works. There may be a loophole of running ads on Facebook, but I still believe if you're a super PAC registered with the FEC, that you would still have to disclose expenses paid to Facebook. Um, but there is like other loopholes for dark money groups to kind of get around that. Uh, but like I said, No Excuses PAC isn't a dark money group; they're a super PAC. So everything that all of their communications, all the commercials and the ads that they put out there need to be disclosed. How much they paid, who's where it's being disseminated, who it's targeting, who it's supporting, that kind of stuff. And nothing in August from No Excuses PAC. In fact, as I reported, they haven't made an ad buy since the end of April, about mid-April. Um, but yet May and June, he's still paying himself, and there's no reason to believe uh, that they're not going to. But it sounds like they don't have any plans of shutting down, if that quote from Trent in that recent article, or in that July article, was to be believed. That they're going to continue going business. The question is, are they actually going to be doing what they said that they were going to do, and how long, is it going to be acceptable for them to actually do that? Are they going to wait? I mean, how long are they going to wait? And in the meantime, are they just going to continue to pay themselves? I mean, $7,500 a month. I mean, that's about $90K a year. That's a pretty sweet gig if you can get it, especially if you're running a super PAC that was supposed to run ads, but you're not actually running any ads.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those sketchy things, in my opinion. And like I said, I've reached out to comment. Maybe there's a good reason Trent is paying himself so much money for not really doing much. I've reached out for comment on that, and I've also reached out to say, hey, are you guys winding down, or do you plan on keep on going? Again, it hasn't been too long since I've sent that request, so it might take a minute for them to get back, if they get back at all. But again, this is just one of those things that it doesn't matter if it's happening on the right or the left. This is just an example of the way PACs work and why they're
Yeah.
bad. Because, I mean, regardless of that, just the numbers say you started this thing to do ads. You didn't really do that. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, $14,000. I mean, out of 101, you barely spent over 10% of the money you raised on ads, and you spent over twice the amount of money you spent on ads you paid to your co-founder. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really know how you're going to make excuses, no pun intended, for that. But I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, and Robbie, it's not just that. Like, whether it's a good excuse or not, like, they're supposed to be running a progressive organization, right? There's supposed to be transparency, showing that we actually are fighting against these people that these oligarchs that control everything and not receiving money from them. But again, that's a problem with this, with these PACs. And just to show everybody what else you said, um, you updated us on August 25th about how they raised $92,000 with 25,000 coming from Way to Lead Us, and then their donors are George Soros and Liz Simmons, which when you've been on here, we've talked about George Soros and how he funds organizations like the Sierra Club and the Sunrise Movement. And they spent $14,000 plus on anti-mansion cinema ads. I mean, it's on the surface, it looks fine that you are running against these corporate politicians, but the way that things are now, the way that we see how politicians are, I personally don't trust them. I mean, we see that when these Democrats get into office, they just do what their party leadership tells them to do. Um, but they're still running as an image, like they're presenting themselves as these people that are going to take down like the status quo and the status quo politicians, right? So you got any comments about that?
I mean, I've got several. I mean, well, I mean, look, as far as Way to Lead goes, I mean, obviously they're one of these political nonprofits. Like, look, the left has way more than the right. I mean, I know that there's a lot of famous ones on the right, like you could do, American Crossroads. Well, American Crossroads is actually a super PAC, but like say Turning Point USA, American Enterprise Institute, Heritage Foundation, right? Heritage Foundation kind of more falling into that think tank, basket. But on the other hand, the left has got a bunch of these little pop up dark money groups. Um, Center for Popular Democracy, Indivisible, Way to Lead. Sunrise Movement is another good example, another great example. Um, there's a litany of them because there are a lot of small working families party, uh, not funded by working families, in case that anybody was
Mm-hmm.
wondering, for the most part, right? I mean, some people that have made a lot of money off of working families put a lot of money into the working families party, so maybe that's a good thing. I don't know, but here's the problem too: is that and actually, I'm kind of working on a piece that's kind of deals with these themes. Is that whenever you say the name George Soros, right? Everybody, oh, great, here we go. But it's not about anything really other than the obvious. The obvious is, you know, for all the good he may or may not do with the money that he spends and, quote unquote philanthropy, um, he still spends an outsized amount of money with no other intention of influencing our elections. Of course, it's not just him, right? There's several billionaires that do these things. Um, he's an easy example, and his name continues to pop up all over the place, which is why he's reported on so much. I mean, there is that. But it's again, whenever you see smaller groups like that say that they're progressive, such as Way to Lead or say Sunrise Movement, stuff like that. Regardless of the conspiracy aspect or the crazy new world order or whatever it is you think about
Mm-hmm.
Soros, the fact of the matter is that he is a extremely influential, extremely powerful democratic establishment mega donor, um, whose money and voice has a lot of sway in that party. That's been documented in more than one ways. It's not just me saying it. So whenever you start taking money as an independent so-called progressive organization, and you're taking money from someone who spends literally millions annually, specifically trying to influence the election on behalf of the Democratic Party, of course that's going to bring scrutiny, right? And of course, no excuses pack again. Um, $25,000 out of the 100,000 they raised came from Way to Lead, who I'm looking at their donors right now. Again, Democracy Pack 100,000. Democracy Pack is Soros's personal super PAC. Elizabeth Simons, she's the daughter of Renaissance Technologies James Simons, who again is another that whole the Simons family in general. They all like to donate to democratic causes. James is kind of the patriarch and built the fortune. And yeah, and he himself, but yeah, is a huge donor. So that's $200,000 out of the roughly like $450,000 that Way to Lead has raised so far this year. So if you want to know where the bulk of their funding is coming from right this second, that's where it is. A couple of billionaires. Um, so that being said, it always kind of makes you kind of look at it sideways, right? Um, and yes, but again, to me, the fact that okay, you can look at that the 25K from Way to Lead and be like, all right, that's sketchy, right? You never really like seeing that kind of stuff because I mean, Way to Lead again has ties to dark money, ties to billionaires. But then you start looking at the numbers that we were talking about earlier: 100,000 raised,
Mm-hmm.
14,000 spent on ads, 37,500 spent on paying yourself. Um, well, if only $25,000 of it came from that one area, that means around $75,000 of it came from normal donors. I don't have the itemized to unitemized ratio in front of me, but by memory of looking at the filing, I would say that there are more
Yeah.
small donations that make up that list than not. Um, and that being, you might be able to catch it on that first picture actually.
Yeah.
Um, let's see, return receipts. Yeah, it's not going to tell me
What's
items.
that
Yeah, that's not
actually?
the. No, go back to the other one. Sorry, just
So
it's an obligation cash total disbursement. Yeah, no, that's not the one. There's another more detailed version of what you said, but I don't think I have it captured. But
okay.
regardless of that, I'm willing to bet that more of that $75,000 than not came from small donors, people that saw this, saw it being promoted on Twitter, not just obviously by Trent and others, but by Dave Weigel and a lots of other indie media outlets that always do this. That they always do this, right? They super PACs are bad until we start one, and then we're gonna promote it. And that's what happened. And I'm pretty sure that's why the quarter one. I mean, look, the numbers tell the story. Quarter one, beginning of February through the end of March, $92,000. Right, that's what they
Mm-hmm.
raised. Because that's when they were being promoted right out the gate by Weigel and others. And of course, people are that's driving traffic on Twitter. That's getting a lot of people to click $5, $10, $20, right? People like you and I that well, hopefully we're smart enough not to do that. But just a lot of people that honestly, get suckered into it because these people have built such a cult of personality around the progressive movement, and they have really got a lot of people that believe, hey, corporate Democrats and the Republicans, they have these super PACs, they're not good. But it's always the tried and true excuse of, well, we have to use their tactics to win, which I don't really believe is true. But I digress. But the fact of the matter is that so many of these I just think about all the small dollar donations that people really truly believed that these Justice Democrat aligned, these consultants, these operatives were going to put together this project to get Manchin and Sinema out of the Senate. And then it really just wound up, at least so far, just paying themselves twice as much as they've spent on the ads that the people really believe that they were going to run. And that's my problem with anything about this, is that almost all of this money needs to be going towards the ads. That's what you paid for, especially if it's a small operation like this. I don't know what Corbin Trent is doing to warrant himself like $1,500 a week or whatever it is he's paying himself, or more than that. It's more than that, But like if we're
Mm-hmm.
doing 4 weeks in a month, $7,500, like that's pretty good. That's pretty good for a week's pay.
Yeah.
For especially and just the fact that they haven't put out any ads in the last 3 months, but yet they're still collecting paychecks off of the money that they raised from these people that funded their project. Hey, look, the cycle is long, right? The midterms haven't even really ramped up. I mean, they're starting to low key, but there's still time. They might end up raising a whole bunch, a whole bunch more money, um, or not. I mean, really, time will tell where this goes. But right now, the numbers are not looking good.
It all just seems like a scheme. Because I mean, if we look at, they're raising ads to take down these corporate Democrats, right? And then let's say they take them down. We have these so-called progressives like AOC who replace Crowley. Cori Bush replaces her constituent. And then it's like, what do they do when they're there? Like, do we actually get do we actually get progress when these corporate Democrats are replaced? Like, if Manchin gets replaced by some Justice Democrat, then what do we get? I mean, it seems like these people are more interested in their career and securing that. And it looks like the people who are in charge of running these ads, like Corbin Trent and Exley, are also careerists, don't you think?
I mean, yeah. Look, it's hard for me to like anybody that looks at politics as like a business model is, I'm always going to look at you a little bit sideways. I mean, I just can't help it because I don't think it should be that way. Like elections should not be this expensive. Uh, and people should not be making as much money as they are off of this, because they're making it
Yeah.
off the backs of donors, regardless, and it's not right, really. And I feel like if there has to be something to be said for just like doing things a different way, instead of like being lazy and just copping out and saying this is the way we have to operate because this is the way they operate, the people that we're supposedly better than. um why not actually sit down and actually put all these big brains to use and find an alternative way to do this with actually like staying true to the morals of the movement that you're supposedly representing. Um, but as far as Manchin goes, he could run as a Republican in West Virginia and win. Um, I don't know, man. Like I feel like he's safe no matter
Mm-hmm.
what. And like cinema, I don't know about that. But here's the problem too, is that we see this time and time again when Justice Democrats want to, when they do try to primary establishment opponents. What does the establishment do? They smear not only the progressive primary opponent, but they smear them with association by their proximity to the other Justice Democrats, whom the establishment Democrats hate with a passion. Yet, and that's the thing about the whole why Justice Democrats cater to establishment Democrats so often, is because time and time again, establishment Democrats have shown you that they hate you. They don't want anything to do with you. They don't even want people in the DCCC taking money from you.
Mm-hmm.
Like because they view you as toxic, and yet so often, they cave. For what kind of concession? I don't know what they've ever gotten out of it, except for no, maybe more money.
So, I mean, we're seeing now, these Democrats, they didn't do anything to get us closer to getting universal health care. And we see with the eviction crisis, like they were grandstanding, performing political theater down in DC. They weren't holding their party leadership accountable like Nancy Pelosi, which you've updated us on recently. As people are getting evicted, losing their homes, they're overwhelmed with rent, with debt, with loans that accumulated, especially during the lockdowns. And Nancy Pelosi and her husband, they got some insider information and they were able to profit off of Microsoft, Roblox, which we've discussed the last time you were here. And they've also invested in hotel acquisition as America reopens. So, what more can you tell us about that, Robbie?
Well, I mean, look, Nancy Pelosi and her husband Paul, obviously no strangers to making big financial moves over the years. Obviously, that's how her net worth has grown so much during her tenure in Congress. Um, but like just recently, as in the last month, uh, the 2020 or the financial disclosures that cover the year 2020, have come out, and that's how we recognize that her net worth actually grew, or at least Sludge is reporting, due to the aggregated numbers of her net worth over the year, the median of that has gone up 16% just last year. She made 16% additional net worth, like a median net worth of like 190 some $1 million. It's actually it's pretty crazy, and she's no stranger to making great trades. Well, her most recent financial or transaction report that came out, and I want to say this was literally just a few weeks ago. Uh, the big story everybody took away from it was that she bought a bunch of Nvidia. She bought like, I can't remember what the actual number. I think like $1 to $5 million in Nvidia, and then another 1 to 5 in options for Nvidia, which makes you wonder. Okay, so what's Nvidia got coming down the pipe? But kind of down in, the fine print, really not really the fine print, but an overlooked part of that report was that her and her husband had invested another 250 to $500,000 in a LLC that is poised to acquire 20 hotels across the United States, 11 Marriott branded and 9 Hilton branded. And this actually is not her first endeavor into the hotel acquisition game. As a matter of fact, in 2020, or maybe in 2019, late 2019, she actually invested in another LLC, which is related to the one that she recently invested in. There's like a previous LLC under the same umbrella, if that makes any sense. And that LLC bought 5 hotels, actually very upscale hotels in in Napa Valley. And there's a couple of more, one in Baltimore. And actually, out of the 25 hotels that she would now have ownership stakes in, actually most of them would be in Texas. I think it's about 8, um, 6 or 8. I don't have that actual number in front of me, but yeah, there's lots of and look, people might argue with me over this, and I mean nobody can predict the future. Um, I mean, I think maybe Delta variant might have scared people into maybe rethinking their 2022 plans. But Forbes had surveyed 500 of the top hospitality industry executives and consultants, and just the people that know the most of that industry, and it's nearly a well, I'm not going to say nearly unanimous, but it's a very majority, a large majority of those experts believe that the hospitality industry is going to be in for a 2022 boom. Um, and it makes sense, right? Because when eventually, you know, you would assume, right? Assuming, and I know that I'm putting a lot on that word here, but you would assume as vaccination rates increase over the course of the next, what you say, 6 to 12 months, um, that by July 4th, 2022, um, you know, there could be a pretty much, I mean, America could be, I'm not going to say back to quote normal. I'm not sure what that means anymore. Um, but about as reopened as we're going to get, right? I feel like by this time next year, again, you're assuming that things progress in a logical way. And we all know how that goes. So again, I mean, I'm willing to eat my crow this time next year. Um, but I'm also putting my words on top of the 500 experts that Forbes. Again, they're the business guys, right? So again, I'm smart enough to know when to defer to people that know more than me on certain things, and that's definitely one of those cases. In researching this article, that the reason why I feel like this is actually an important piece of little news here is that um yeah, like it's not even just about the eviction moratorium expiring. It's just the fact that once again, Nancy Pelosi and her husband, being the shrewd operators that they are, they get ahead of everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think Pelosi probably knows that, yeah, 2022, we're looking, that's what she might be being told. Now, like, this is all speculation because I don't want to, I can't imply that she's committing some kind of crime, right? Um, but let's just be honest, though, right? She's Speaker of the House. She's what? She's the third most powerful person in Washington, D.C., right? Um, to think that she's not having conversations, and we've discussed this before,
Yeah.
she's in rooms with people we'll never meet, having discussions we'll never know about things that we'll never know about again, like, so to say that she doesn't have an inside track on these types of things, that's just ridiculous. Which is again why no members of Congress should be able to not only own stock, but this is another way. Like, this isn't stock, right? She's investing in a private business run by a man named Greg Flynn, who, by the way, is also the largest restaurant franchisor in the entire country. Like he's built an empire and is working on a real estate. He's got lots of commercial real estate. They invest in office buildings too, by the way. They've got holdings in several office buildings. Um, and look, they took a loss on the first 5 hotels during 2020, as expected, right? I mean, it's hard to find anybody that really made money off of not selling their hotel in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's to be expected. But these are really, really, the first 5 are really, really nice. These 20 that she's poised to invest in, I mean, again, they're nice Marriotts, they're nice Hiltons, so I mean, I don't remember the last time I've stayed at a Hilton, right? But I mean, I've looked into some of the hotels there, some of the locations, you know, I mean, look, regardless of how many stars they have, it's just a good investment if you're thinking that, hey, if you're banking on a 2022 rebound for the hospitality economy, the travel economy, in particular, what better way than to go ahead and scoop up a bunch of hotels, or at least get some interest in some hotels, and let that sweet monopoly money roll in, which appears to be what the philosophy here is.
Yeah, and it's straight up authoritarianism. Which she said herself, how much she said she has awesome power, like she can do so much as the Speaker of the House. But then, like, what is she actually doing to help people? And so, seeing your report and seeing what's been happening, since last year during 2020. It really, like, watching this video right here that I'm about to share, it hits differently. And I'm sure you've seen it a lot, but you never know when there's new people that come into the stream. And this is also like a reminder for people who have seen it, like this video here of, Nancy Pelosi. She's laughing with her, her expensive fridges in the back. Meanwhile, it compares people to how working class people, how they're living, how they've been suffering during the pandemic. And things have not gotten worse, because homelessness is tripling, because 10% were left out during the moratorium, and now it's going to be even more millions of people. And again, this is adding on to all the suffering that people are already going through. So I'm just going to play this again and see if, like, how it hits different. It may hit different with taking Robbie's reporting into context.
We turn now to that $350 billion fund to help small businesses and its workers get through the shutdown.
It will be up to Congress to restock it.
But Democrats blocking that move this morning.
They asked for $250 billion in 48 hours. I said, well, I don't think so. They objected, and I congratulate the Senate Democrats.
Speaker Pelosi, what are you going to share with us from your home?
Chocolate candy.
Thousands have been forced to wait for hours at food banks all across the country.
This is chocolate, and then we have some other chocolate here. We just got it restocked with the ice cream.
You don't want to eat up everything all at one time.
I can't do it much longer. I'm trying so hard.
We were, shall we say, enjoying.
Having to admit that, yeah, we're starving, and
I like it better than anything else.
Taping this segment, there are 22 million people out of work.
This specific program is about stopping job losses today.
This is hurting people bad.
Other people in our family go for some other flavors, but
right now it's survival move. You don't know where that next something else is going to come from.
I don't know what I would have done if ice cream were not invented. I just wonder.
It just makes me feel so angry seeing that, and then seeing the people who are suffering. And then as she, has this insider information with people, who she talks to, and then, we see her get richer, as time passes on, right?
Yeah. And look, I think the only reason that campaign ad wasn't, that was an effective ad that the Trump campaign actually produced there whenever I remember when that came out, like it was actually, but I feel like the reason it didn't work as well is just because it was coming from the president directly. Right. And like,
who also wasn't doing anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, I think if that would have been kind of made from like an outside group, like maybe that would have had more, but no, man. Yeah. Obviously the ice cream thing, unforgettable. Yeah. Right. Because look, it's how many times do these politicians, especially the wealthiest among them, have to show you how completely out of touch they are with everything of the working class people have to go through. It's not just even working class. They're out of touch on racial issues and indigenous issues. It's not even like, and it's all theater because they. Look, when Pelosi donned the kente cloth, like, you remember that too? Yeah. And it's like, this is all for show, and it should offend you, right? Because they're obviously just doing this for votes and for donations. And they don't. But when it comes down to it, they will sit back and eat ice cream while you starve. They do it all the time. They will do it every time.
Yeah, their campaigning never stops. Like the fake tears that they do, AOC in front of the border, Cori Bush at the Capitol talking about her tears. Oh my God! Even though no one was actually saved, they were just kicking the can down the road. People still owed rent. The campaigning just doesn't stop, and then at the root of it, they're not trying to fix anything. Like imagine if Corbin Trent had done an attack ad on Nancy Pelosi like that. Like they could easily do an effective ad showing the numbers that you show people, right? If they use that information to show people how they need to get taken out of office, like these Nancy Pelosi's and Joe Manchins and Chuck Schumer's, but they won't do it because they don't actually want the problem fixed. Because if it did get fixed, then they wouldn't have a job.
We wouldn't need them anymore now, would we?
Right. So yeah, the other thing that you reported on recently was on Fidelity Charitable. So let's talk about that now, and how you reported on their tax forms revealing over $80 million in anonymous donations to New Venture Fund, which is a dark money juggernaut that is also the parent company to the dark money group 1630 Fund. So what is so significant about this?
Okay, so when I get into this type of stuff, it's like Inception type level shit sometimes, because when you're dealing with dark money groups, a lot of times you've got the parent organization, and then you've got the smaller organizations that it funds, and then so on and so forth. And each one of these organizations may have a couple of their own, and the money just flows downhill. So I think we should just start with what New Venture Fund is and why its funding is significant. So New Venture Fund is the baby, the largest of the group of Arabella Advisors network of political nonprofits. Arabella Advisors was ran by a name named Eric Kessler, who is he was a former Clinton staffer, and since has built a nonprofit empire. The company itself, while they do kind of manage their own groups, they also consult for other nonprofits, and they also kind of do some, kind of guide them on where they need to spend their money, right? So they do that type of work. But so they have four major nonprofits under the Arabella umbrella, right? It sounds like a fucking band name, right?
Yeah.
So the first one and the largest one is the New Venture Fund, and 2019 is the latest tax returns we have for that. But it brought in about $490 million in 2019, and $450 million of that came in the form of donations, which were undisclosed as far as where they came from. Some amounts were disclosed. So $73 million of it came. That was the highest donor, right? Of course, there's no name on it, just an amount. So of course, that's where my research comes in, and it came that $73 million, like almost 100% came from Fidelity Charitable, which we'll kind of get to in a minute, because I want to make sure that everybody knows why this matters. So New Venture Fund, $490 million dark money in 2019. Again, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of untraceable money. Well, not all the way, because as that's where I come in. But what does New Venture Fund do? Well, again, they spend a lot of money funding other organizations, some of them political, some of them non-political, some of them like universities, which, I guess you could argue could be political. But out of the money that they did spend in 2019, by far their largest donation was $33 million to a group called the 1630 Fund, which belongs to Arabella in their network. And matter of fact, specifically, is kind of like the sister, or more of like a daughter nonprofit or son nonprofit to New Venture Fund, because New Venture Fund acts as what they call as the paymaster, right? Pretty much all of the funds and all of the staff and everything that 1630 Fund uses kind of just they soak off of New Venture Fund. And again, $33 million was the largest donation that New Venture Fund made, and it went straight to 1630 Fund. I mean, now you're starting to see why I'm talking like it's some Inception shit.
Mm-hmm.
So that 1630 fund is the reason why this is all relevant. Because when we talk about dark money, again, we're talking about layers of donors giving large sums of money to groups whose purpose is to influence our elections. And that's what 1630 Fund did to AT in 2020. They spent over $60 million funding pro-Democrat super PACs. And that, was enough to crack like the top 5 of super PAC funders for the entire election cycle. I believe they were the top dark money spender. It was close between them and Karl Rove's old dark money group, which is still actually quite active. But see, they spent 7.4 million. 1630 Fund spent 7.4 million on funding Future Forward USA. That's a pro-Biden super PAC. The League of Conservation Voters Victory Fund did a lot of stuff for Biden. Change Now, Take Back 2020. Again, these are pro-Democrat PACs. America's Progressive Promise. That is notable because that's the Jeff Weaver super PAC that he started whenever he left Bernie's campaign. $4.75 million from 1630 Fund. That was literally like the only donation Jeff Weaver got was from 1630 Fund. Just a giant load of dark money. And the list goes on and on, even down to Sunrise Movement, who, by the way, their PAC, their largest individual donor was 1630 Fund, $500,000 to their PAC in the 2020 cycle. Not to mention the $250,000 from George Soros's PAC, which, just between those two donors right there, that made up a significant amount of the money that Sunrise Movement made. So again, it's not just the funding of Priorities USA and Future Forward and stuff like that. These colossal super PACs that were spending like tens and tens of millions of dollars. It's also trickling down to the more progressive organizations, organizations like Sunrise Movement. So now that we've cleared up why 1630 Fund is important, why New Venture Fund, who controls them and is the primary funder of them, is important. So now let's get to why Fidelity matters. Because to me, I know I get into my nerd shit when I talk about all these numbers, but really, guys, if we're talking about you wanting to change campaign finance, you want campaign finance reform, you want to get dark money out of politics, it's not as simple as it seems. Just making nonprofits, just making a 501c4 disclose their donors is not going to go far enough. Like For the People Act had too many loopholes, right? But one thing it didn't address at all was donor advised funds. And that is what Fidelity Charitable is. As a matter of fact, they're the largest such donor advised fund in the country. $9.4 billion in 2020. That's an insane amount of money moving through there. And basically how they work, for those that don't know really quickly, is that I've got a lot of money. I want to donate it to charity. I just don't know where, but I want that tax write-off right now. So what do? You call up Fidelity, you give them $1 million or so dollars. Just to say I give them $1 million, open an account. So I can get my tax deduction right there, right? Because my gift, my giving that $1 million to Fidelity, even if it's sitting in an account, counts as a donation that I can write off immediately. But it can sit in that account indefinitely until I decide to tell Fidelity where to put it. So during that time, it could accrue interest, it could do whatever, or I could decide that I don't want to donate it. There's a million different things you could do with it. But whenever you do decide to donate it, right? When that $1 million goes to whatever organization you decide to donate it to, it's not going to be in your name. It's going to be in the name of Fidelity Charitable. And it's going to be rolled into a big lump of all the other donors that decided to donate to this same organization. So it's gonna be your $1 million tied with 3 other people's $1 million, So when we see the $80 million that New Venture Fund got from Fidelity Charitable in 2020, which I'm almost we'll get to this in a second. I was almost sure that was going to be by far their largest donor, because it was the case in 2019. Because again, that $73 million came from Fidelity Charitable. So for those keeping score, over the last 2 years, one of the largest liberal dark money groups in the country has been funded to the tune of over $150 million through a donor advised fund. Which again, there's nothing in any kind of current campaign finance reform legislation that would require donor advised fund donors to require to make their names public. So there's that, right? I mean, $80 million straight up untraceable. We will never ever know where that 80 million came from. That's significant, and it's a great example of dark money, why it's bad and why we need to fix it. But look, I ran down a whole piece of the largest funders of this thing, and it's pretty much a who's who of every powerful liberal donor that exists, quite honestly. Silicon Valley, I mean, they've all got a piece in New Venture Fund. They all donate to it, and none more so than anyone other than Bill Gates.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, this is why, and this is how they stay in power. You know, they donate money anonymously. We don't know where these large amounts of money come from. And you know, you were bringing up Bill Gates, and yeah, you did update us recently with this tweet right here, right? This ties into what you were just telling us here,
right?
So you want to tell us a little bit more about this?
Sure. So look, when I first wrote the article, I wrote an article of early August about New Venture Fund and where it got the majority of its money. See, the article you were showing right there, that's like my follow-up. And then as soon as I wrote that follow-up, I outdated myself again.
Yeah.
So, the fact is that what we had previously thought, let me back up. Again, like I said earlier, 2019, that's the latest numbers we have for New Venture Fund. That's also the latest numbers that we have for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as far as tax returns go. But the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's website has a online grant database. The only problem is, as I found out, that just because they've moved on to listing grants made in 2021 does not mean that they have actually completed listing all of the grants from 2020. As I found out in early August when I was looking through that database and was like, okay, so we already knew pretty much, again, going back to that 2019 tax return for New Venture Fund, there was the 73 million, which again, not to get super technical, the reason it doesn't, it's a staggered, like their fiscal year or to build, it's just all, it's wonky how they do it. It's really a pain in the ass if you really want my honest opinion. But 73 million, we knew Fidelity Charitable. And then we saw another number, like 25 million. And that cross-referenced with the Bill Gates Foundation's 2019 tax return, we found out that came from them, right? That's $25 million in 2019, roughly 26. Well, so I followed up on that, right? Once I saw the Fidelity numbers were out, I was like, okay, maybe I can try to find out. Maybe there is a way to, see. I checked up on the Bill Gates Foundation's taxes. They're not out yet. As soon as they are, I'll have them. But their grant database at the time on August 11th, it had been updated, I believe, like 2 days prior to me searching this thing. I found another $19.5 million that the Gates Foundation gave New Venture Fund in 2020, which is information that I wouldn't have been able to attain until later in the year, waiting on the tax documents, but the Gates Foundation gave it to me in the form of their database. I did not know, however, obviously, that the database was incomplete because 2 weeks later, as you just showed, something just told me to go back and just search it again. And because, trust me, that number will pop up if I see that number. And that's why, like, the screenshot to my original tweet, there's 10 million, there's the 10 million and then 2 4 millions, because obviously those were the largest and those were the ones that I wanted to put on the screen for obvious reasons. And then here it is. I see that the database had been updated on the 23rd of August. So just a couple of weeks after my initial report, and there it is, $50 million more from the Gates Foundation to this network. And look, that jumps them up from 19.5 to damn near 70 million, which is like a close to a 3 times increase from over the previous year, and would almost certainly make Bill Gates the second largest donor, at least that we can find, to the new venture fund. I don't see, I mean, unless, I mean, look, I could be completely blown away by new venture funds numbers in 2020 when they come out in December. But I would assume, and again, I could get in trouble for that, but 70 million from one foundation, and then you got 80 million from Fidelity. I mean, at least we can identify where 70 million came from, right? And look, it's not because they're telling, New Venture Fund would not have told us this on their tax returns, and this is how the dark money hunting kind of works. Because thank God there are places out there where you can kind of cross-reference tax documents with each other, and find out, because again, like I always say, these dark money groups, they don't have to tell you where they're getting their money from, but they do have to tell you where they're giving their money to. And just because we have at least that much information, we might not be able to track down every individual donor, but if another nonprofit donated to your nonprofit, we should be able to find that. And that is how we find the information that we find about Gates. And it's how we uncovered the identities behind dark money, because it's dark until we find out who it is, because they're not telling us willingly. New Venture Fund does not come out, and New 1630 Fund, Sunrise Movement, I mean, Center for American Progress, Turning Point, it doesn't matter. They're not going to come out and just tell you, hey, we got $100 million and this is who it's from. Absolutely not. So that's where we come in. And if you really want to know the people behind the curtain, I encourage you to read my article on New Venture Fund, because again, it's Gates, it's Soros, it's, a bunch of Silicon Valley millionaires and billionaires. Literally, the list goes on and on and on. I managed to uncover or identify roughly 180 million of the 450 million in donations that New Venture Fund got in 2019. As far as my knowledge, that's the most extensive dig anybody's done on the outfit. 1630 Fund individually, there's really not as much information available as far as donors. So if you can't find anything about 1630, then we look into what we can find, who is obviously their closest relative in the nonprofit space, which is New Venture Fund. So guys, this is important, right? I mean, you want to know who's really, I mean, this is a lot of influence. This is a lot of money. And this is a big problem.
Yeah. And people should be questioning, why do they want to stay anonymous? Like, what do they have to hide? Like, what do they not want us to know? That how much they're influencing everything that's going on, how much they're influencing these organizations, like the 6030, 13, what is it, 1360
or 1630?
1630. Yeah, I'm getting all these numbers. I'm getting them mixed.
Dude, I know. I'm sorry.
But yeah, like, we should be questioning that. It's like, why do they want to stay anonymous? They don't want you to know, how much they control, which also includes politicians. And you reported how the Republicans and the Democrats, the two sides of the same coin, part of the two-party illusion, because they're paid by the same people. They're neck and neck, right? They're locked in close in fundraising battle after July. So what does it mean that Democrats and Republicans are fundraising so close to each other in numbers? And I believe they're also fundraising via the same donors, right? Or a lot of the same donors.
Well, I mean, the same donors that they've always gotten money from, So, Lee, look, here's where we stand right now at the end of July. The RNC, 97. The RNC raised 12 or nearly 13 million in July. That brought them up to nearly 98 million year to date. On the other hand, the DNC raised right around 13 million in July, which brought them up to about 100 million year to date. So there's literally like a $2 million difference between the main Republican and Democratic Party structures right now. I mean, and we can even go down to, the congressional party bodies. So the NRCC, the DCCC equivalent of the Republican Party, 7 million in July. It ended the so far year to date 86 million. On the other hand, DCCC 11 million in July, so 81, nearly 82 million for the year. So actually, the DCCC is lagging behind the NRCC in year to date fundraising by about 4 million. And again, 4 million in this case is not that wide of a gap, but it seems to me, and again, let's check in on the Senate here. NRSC 7.5 million in July. That brought them to 58 million from year to date. 6.4 million for the DSCC, 53 million year to date. So yeah, I mean, so that's not good news for Democrats either. The NRSC has outraised the DSCC by over 5 million year to date. And I think the DNC had a good month, but here's the thing though about the DNC. They've been carrying a lot of their money from Biden's victory fund, right? They've gotten quite a significant amount of their money, over 10%, 15% of their money has come from that. You know, I haven't seen a whole lot of money passing from Trump's old accounts to the Republican Party. There has been some, but nothing like that. So I mean, you have to take that into account. And the Biden Victory Fund is like full of billionaires, right? I mean, that's kind of it. That's what its purpose was to aggregate and bundle billionaire donations, large dollar donations, and split them between the Biden campaign and the DNC. That was basically the whole entire purpose, and they're still milking that for all that it's worth. But you know, look, Nancy Pelosi's Victory Fund has been powering the DCCC. You know, and look, man, it's still early, but you can tell right now that Republicans are really pushing. They're already jumping out of the gate because they understand that Democrats are vulnerable and Biden is vulnerable. And look, they're using that's getting them some money right now. I mean, look, the donors aren't great, right? I mean, what the top donors for July for the DCCC, you know, you've still got, again, there's James Simons, like we talked about earlier, and his wife Marilyn. Nancy Pelosi's Victory Fund has been a huge factor. The DNC, again, Biden Victory Fund, George Soros, Eric Schmidt, the former chairman of Google. Let's see, who else we got here? I think that was pretty much all the big ones for that. Like, again, I do this one segment for my newsletter every month. Whenever the new party numbers come out, I break them down and update these with the top donors for the month. The Republicans have been getting a lot of money from, I think one of their largest donors so far is FedEx CEO Fred Smith. They've been getting lots of money from the oil and gas industry, like J.C. Walter, chairman of Walter Oil and Gas, gave the RNC, what was it, $328,000. So, I mean, look, both sides of the same coin is exactly right. You've got, you know, tech billionaires, hedge fund managers, you know, on one side, and then you've got, you know, look, Democrats aren't just going to openly take money from an oil executive. They might secretly invest in them on the low, but they know that FEC filings get dug through pretty publicly, and they're not going to take a $320,000 from J.C. Walter of Walter Oil and Gas like that. They're not going to do that, but they will take money from a lot of people that invest in oil and gas, such as, again, circling back to George Soros, who, by the way, whose his hedge fund reported their last quarterly numbers. He made a $40 million investment in a company called Golar LNG. Guess what the LNG stands for? Liquid natural gas. I cannot get the word out of my mouth. And what I mean, that's their whole industry, right? It's the transportation of natural gas. You know, but we're not supposed to critique that. I feel like that gets you're not allowed to say, "Oh, Soros money is bad," or so and so's money is bad because of what they invest in. And it's not like that's not a tiny investment for him. That's actually like a pretty moderately sized investment for Soros Fund Management. So it's definitely something like, hey, why is it not okay for Republicans to take money from the chairman of an oil company? Obviously, that's bad. But it is okay for you to take nearly that same amount of money from someone who invests tens of billions of dollars. I mean, let's just face it. I mean, look, this is a very insignificant amount of money in comparison to his other investments, but Soros still owns a very small, like a $2.5 million stake in Energy Transfer Partners. They own DAPL. That's not a problem. I feel like that should be a problem. I mean, we could be nitpicking all day, but as we talk about Ro Khanna here in a minute, divesting is possible. You have the power to just not invest in these companies, whether it's 2 million out of your 5 billion or if it's $1 billion out of your 5 billion. However much money you have, it doesn't really matter the percentage of your portfolio. We don't want you to invest in them, and if you're going to invest in them, then we don't want your money. It should be that simple. But we're talking about the Democratic establishment right now, and we all know that cash is king in the DNC, and they don't care about stuff like that. So I mean,
that's the point we got to get across to people too, is about how they can still receive money from these people indirectly like this, like these people who invest in the oil and gas industry. But yeah, I mean, do you think that the Democrats are going to get crushed in 2022 by looking at these numbers?
Well, look, as you know, when we get closer to November 2022, all of these numbers across the board are going to just spike, right? Going down the stretch from June onwards. So it's kind of hard to say right now. I would say that Republicans are definitely on a good track, because if it's not for the Biden Victory Fund, look, and a lot of that money's left over from last year. Is what's funny, the DNC coming out of the gate this year. If it wasn't for that, they'd be sorely behind in a lot of these categories. Again, Nancy Pelosi has been doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the DCCC, but then again, her Victory Fund is funded by a lot of the same people that fund Biden's. So that's not really surprising. So looking at the numbers, it's hard to say if they're going to get smashed in 2022. I feel like that a lot also is dependent on what kind of campaigns Republicans run. If they run stupid campaigns and just have terrible messaging, or just bad strategy, and it's really not going to matter how much money they spend, right? We saw that with Nina Turner, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much money you raise if you run a bad campaign. So there's that. But look, Republicans are on the right track here. They're usually month to month. July was the best month the Democrats have had in a while, and they still lost in 2 out of 3 categories for the month. If that tells you anything. So yeah, I mean, it's not on a good track, but again, it's an off year. It's 2021. There's not a lot happening right now, but you can tell that Republicans feel aggressive. Their donors feel aggressive. Like, we haven't gotten much from the big guys, right? We haven't seen much from Griffin or, Adelson passed last year, but his wife may or may not continue the giving. We've seen Peter Thiel, dumping millions into SuperPACs, but we haven't really seen a lot of party play right now. So there's still time. Again, things will ramp up in full. It's going to be, and I know we say this every midterms, but this one will yet again be the most expensive midterms in history, because Republicans feel aggressive and Democrats feel very defensive. I mean, it feels, just looking at the numbers, like Democrats are backpedaling. Right, they're trying, like, they're on their heels, looking for some kind of swing in momentum. Which, with the Afghanistan things, I mean, Republicans are going to eat Biden alive on that. And I mean, look, I would expect the August numbers, especially going into September, would probably back that up. I think that the Republicans are going to fundraise like hell off of. And I know this sounds crazy, and I hear myself when I talk about this shit, because I was like, damn, did I just totally detach myself from reality when I just talk about this shit? Because Republicans are definitely going to fundraise off of the travesty in Afghanistan. It's no big deal, when it's actually totally disgusting. It's actually a totally disgusting thing, but that's politics for you, and that's what's going to happen. And
they're like, oh my gosh, great opportunity.
October, that DNC might be in an even bigger hole than they're in now.
It's hard for the Republicans too to not look like hypocrites with all this. I was like, but how are you any better than the Democrats? You're hitting on them on Afghanistan and all that, but you're also, you do the same thing as them. But then it's also hard for the Democrats to not look like hypocrites.
Exactly.
Like both parties are hypocrites.
Hey, look, you're in charge now, so you get the blame now. That's the way that they're going to put it. That's what Democrats did for the last 4 years. That's what Republicans are going to do for the next 4. That's American.
It's a
politics.
never-ending cycle.
Fucking
it's like we got to get majority of the House and the Senate. They get the majority of the House and the Senate. They don't do anything, and then it's just the other party saying the same thing. It's just a never-ending cycle. And then the progressives are like, with their messaging is like, oh no, you need to get us in so we can get these progressive policies passed. But as we know, from Ro Khanna, our Silicon Valley friend that we've discussed here multiple times already. What can you update us about this guy? I mean, you've broke a lot of stories that even caught his attention before.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us now?
All right. So my reporting on Ro Khanna, and I don't want to take the long road here, but just to kind of give a quick synopsis here, my reporting on Ro Khanna stems back to February of last year. As many remember, there was lots of stories coming out about politicians, namely Republican senators, Perdue, Loeffler, Burr, had gotten in some hot water about allegedly making a lot of, and I mean, not allegedly, I mean, look, it's some shady shit, but they were making lots of investments in pharmaceutical stocks prior to lockdowns, like right in that period of time before the lockdowns really started ramping up and coming into effect. It was like early to mid-February. And as we know, like March is when things really started ramping up in here in America and really started locking down. And of course, the market crash, right? It totally tanked the market there for a minute. And so the market was already tanking whenever all these transactions were made. And obviously you're looking for a big rebound if you're trying to, load up on pharmaceutical stocks, especially if you know that there's a pandemic on the horizon, which I don't think the seriousness of mid-February was really publicly known. Like, I know that people were aware of COVID. They were aware that, it was spreading, but I don't think that the American public had really been sat down and been like, hey, this is what's about to happen. This is about to be some serious shit, and I don't think that still in mid-February that we were really expecting what we got, right? Whether or not we should have or not. The fact is that I think we can all agree that it was totally bungled on every level, and it started from the very beginning because, look, again, the reason why these Republican senators got in hot water was because they made these purchases in these pharmaceutical stocks like right after a meeting that they had, like some kind of briefing that they had on the coming pandemic, or or at least a briefing that contained lots of information about what was happening, and then they all rushed to their brokers, and that's where it kind of something with Ro Khanna caught my eye, is that and again, this issue's come up more recently with Rand Paul. It was, Rand Paul took like 16 months to update his financial report to reflect that him and his wife bought like up to $15,000 in what was it, Gilead Sciences, that make the makers of Remdesivir, back in February. And my response to that is, well, back in February, I broke that Ro Khanna had, and well, through his trusts, his wife's multiple trust funds had, they had bought up, was it like 82 to like 400 some $1,000 worth of Pfizer, bought up a bunch of DuPont, which was they made a lot of PPE, and then they of course were selling off their casinos, their Caesars and stuff like that. Again, mid-February, the exact same time frame as Perdue, as Loeffler, as Burr, and I saw Ken Klippenstein the other day, like talking about how bad it was that Rand Paul had invested this money in Gilead, which of course it is. I mean, they shouldn't be allowed to own stocks, but I simply just said, if you think that's bad, you should see all the money that Ro Khanna's family put into freaking Pfizer at that exact same time that we're talking about crucifying Rand Paul for. And of course, in the process of finding that, and Khanna did respond at the time and was like, hey, that's my wife's money. It wouldn't be right for me to tell her what to do with her money. That'd be sexist, blah, blah, blah. I kind of rolled my eyes at that one because that's kind of just a bullshit response. And they proved it was a bullshit response because, Sludge also reported, actually a couple of months before I reported the pharmaceutical stuff, the guys over at Sludge reported how much money Ro Khanna and his wife had invested in defense stocks, which was an astronomically high number. It actually put them in like the top 5 of everyone in Congress. And again, at the same time, the trust funds also had a lot of oil and gas, like, there was Chevron, there was Exxon, there was Phillips 66. Literally, it was like, this is a progressives portfolio. I don't understand. So fast forward to late last year, Code Pink apparently finally got Ro Khanna's wife to fully divest from defense companies and oil companies, thus proving that the excuse about, I can't tell her what to do with her money, come on, man. I mean, it was just one of these put your money where your mouth is situations. You can be as rich as you want to be, but you're having a hard time selling me on the anti-war thing when you make a lot of money from the pro-war thing.
And his voting record also.
It didn't sit right, but apparently Code Pink got his wife to divest from those two industries. And when he released his financial disclosures that covered 2020, the entire year, and I've examined his transactions since the beginning of the year, I can safely say that Khanna has divested from pretty much every military industrial complex company that was in his portfolio, with the exception of 2, one being Leidos, who the largest government contractor in the country, as a matter of fact. They handle pretty much 90%, pretty much all of the DoD's IT needs, and several other. They're actually a massive corporate, and they do have they do have a large part to play in the defense contracting industry. And the other one is Honeywell. And of course, Honeywell makes everything, but they also make weapons of war. But compared to the Raytheon and the General Dynamics and all that stuff, that it was a laundry list. And so I can say that yes, the effort was made by Khanna and his wife and I didn't find any oil companies except for a holding in Berkshire Hathaway, obviously Warren Buffett's firm, and they recently just bought like $4 billion worth of Chevron. So that's a huge problem, right? It makes them one of the largest owners of Chevron, actually, in the world. And so, yeah, like whenever you've got, whenever you're still holding, that's just something that kind of still owns, right? He still owns Honeywell, Leidos. Okay. That's a huge cut down from what you did have as far as the companies in the defense go. You got rid of all the Exxon and the Chevrons and stuff, but you still got Berkshire, which is kind of a problem for me, at least. And I could be nitpicking. Fine, whatever. You can come at me if you think I'm nitpicking. That's fine. But again, Berkshire and Warren Buffett have a significant stake in Chevron. So that's a problem for me. I wouldn't be investing any money that, again, I don't want to contribute to that. I don't want my money to contribute to you making money off of your oil. And I don't want your oil, the money that you make from the profit of your oil investment, to trickle down into my account. I just don't want that. That could just be me. And I don't have the list of companies right in front of me. I should. I'm sorry. But I think he still has holdings in, like,
let me see if you have it here.
Yeah, I mean, we got United Health, Johnson and Johnson, Bristol Myers Squibb. Okay, so let's do the pharmaceutical. Of course, we got the Pfizer, right? And DuPont, which I'm pretty sure they took a loss on. But then we've got Merck, Johnson and Johnson, Bristol Myers Squibb. These are all investments of up to like $100,000 to $115,000. And of course, he's got Regeneron stock, which everybody was up in arms about, like the DeSantis thing. But I mean, even here, Ro Khanna's got some Regeneron lying around in his portfolio. And here's the problem too, though, is that pharmaceutical companies, I mean, that's a no-brainer in a pandemic. Anybody with money is going to invest in those. But then again, like, you have to just draw the line somewhere. Like, are we going to be profiting off of people's pain, or aren't we? And again, the Medicare for all thing, that's a huge issue, right? For progressives, that's supposedly like a tentpole issue. So the investments in United Health up to $250,000. CVS Health, who bought Aetna a couple years ago, up to $50,000 in that. He owns some Aflac. He owns some Anthem and Cardinal Health. You know, that's look, the reason why I'm nitpicking here is because it worked the first time. Right? This is why we pressure politicians in hopes that they actually take what we're saying to heart and get rid of this crap that we don't want them to have. No, Ro Khanna, we don't want you to own any of this money in any of this. Look, it should be right here in the paragraph below. Whenever I noted that Khanna's wife divested all of her money from, from the defense companies and oil companies, she stuck them in municipal bonds. Now look, a lot of our great friend Allie just wrote a great piece about municipal bonds. Allie Alexandra, you should follow her on Twitter if you haven't already. But she's done a great piece on that. But I have an opinion on, like, look, if you're going to invest any of your money, I mean, look, this could be controversial. I mean, I don't know, but I'm just trying to find ways. Yeah, you know, they're making lots of money, and as Allie says here, and you know, I'm kind of conflicted on, you know, what's the right way for these people like being congressmen and senators. What's the right way for them to use their money? I mean, and at first, and look, and I actually maybe had a bit of a naive viewpoint on that until I read Allie's wonderful article on the subject. Was that I was thinking in my head, like, well, wouldn't that be the ideal way? But we want these wealthy congressmen and representatives to invest their money into the communities and fund the infrastructure projects that these bonds are supposedly being sold for. You know, it's not a perfect solution. But as Allie showed in her article, there's lots of that's got its own myriad of pratfalls involved with that. So I encourage everybody to check that out if you're further interested in that subject. But yeah, I mean, we want to pressure Ro Khanna to divest from every last holding, because that's the goal, right, guys? Is to get these these congressmen and women to stop profiting off of the companies that they're supposed to be regulating, number one, but at the very least stop profiting from the companies that whose business model or business practices are in direct contradiction to the morals or the values that you're supposedly upholding. If you are a fan of Medicare for all, you cannot why would you invest in United Health or Aetna? I mean, those are two of the biggest obstacles standing in your way of achieving that. So again, the pharma stuff, like, look, whoever was running, do I believe Ro Khanna made a phone call to his money manager, or Ro Khanna's wife made a phone call to her whoever manages their money, because they have so much money? I seriously doubt that his wife is sitting at a computer all day trading these things, right? They pay somebody to do this stuff, but it's obviously somebody that they can tell to get out of a certain industry, and that will do that for them, right? So knowing all this is true, I looking back at it and seeing the Pfizer story like over a year later, whoever was managing their money was definitely making a clear-cut attempt to profit off the pandemic economy. Not even close. Like, somebody knew something from somewhere. All of these guys did, whether whoever was running Khanna's money, whoever was Burr, Loeffler, Perdue, all of them. Even Feinstein had a few stories come out about her, about even though the company she was buying up or selling off, well, I think it was buying up, had really little to do with anything related to COVID, but still, we were on the hunt for any of that insider trading shit. You can best believe. And I mean, whoever was running Khanna's accounts was absolutely trying to profit off the pandemic. That's not even a question. But again, we've seen that it's possible to get these people to divest. Khanna responded to my most recent report on his transactions. He thanked me for updating the information, and being factual about it, which I of course always strive to do. And here's the thing: is that I've still seen, I saw Graham Elwood just the other day doing a video about how Ro Khanna owns $300 and some thousand in defense companies, and I just wish that I was it's not really like it's okay to give him credit. I mean, look, I don't really know how much credit to give him because it's something that he could have always done, right? But at least be factual, be updated with the story. He does not currently own that much money in defense companies or oil anymore. He did, but he does not as of December 2020. He does not anymore. But again, there's other things to critique here, and a lot of that's the pharma and the insurance stock. So I mean, that's where we're at with Ro Khanna right now. He's proven that he at least is listening. He's definitely listening. He's probably watching this right now. I'm just kidding. He might not be. He might be though. I don't know.
What's up, Ro Khanna?
What's up? But seriously though, I mean, this is why we do this reporting though, is because you never know the impact that it's going to have. It could have an immediate impact, or it could snowball effect into something that pushes one of these people in power to make a change. And hopefully we can continue to push, not just with my reporting, but with anybody's contributions.
They'll either try to hide it more, or they'll change, for the better. But this is exactly what we're trying to end. Like you hit the nail on the head here, about how this is what we're trying to vote out. Like, and you're running as this progressive who supposedly is going to end this stuff, but you're getting money from from the pharmaceutical industry, and then that reflects on his rhetoric too when he talks about the COVID narrative, which we can't really get too much into here because we're still live on YouTube. But we've seen what he's pushing. So I mean, when you look at the money that that you reported on, like where it comes from, then it explains a lot. I mean, that's why people, when if they still believe in electoral politics, who these people get their money from, really speaks to who they're actually going to serve. And Nico House called it a long time ago. Like I remember long before I ever had a YouTube channel, he would say that Ro Khanna is a careerist, like a careerist progressive. Like he made progressivism a career. It's this new, what do you call it? Like this new generation of politicians who pose themselves as progressives so that they can get elected, but they're still profiting off of the system more so than they're actually fighting for it. But yeah, Robbie, this is the kind of reporting that Robbie does here at the MCSC network. He's doing excellent work. You can support him over at his Politify newsletter. Right, you want to give us more information about that before we close off here?
Sure thing. So once again, thanks for having me on, Franco. It's always a pleasure. I know we always say this, but we got to get back at this more often. For those that do want to support my work, Jaeger.substack.com, Jaeger. You can see it. I actually spelled it right. I got it spelled right because I got to put it on myself, and I'm also not on Nico's show, who always
Jaeger
spells it wrong. Shout out to Nico. But yeah, so Jaeger.substack.com. That's the Politify newsletter. It's just a bunch. I try to aggregate a lot of the biggest campaign finance stories every 2 weeks. Some of them are longer than others. Some of them might just be like, I wanted to find a place for stories that were maybe not 800 words, but needed more than a tweet, right? So that is what the newsletter is for. I try to keep up with all the biggest names and numbers of the political finance and the nonprofit, dark money, lobbying, all the stock trades and stuff that we're talking about. That's the best way to do it. Other than that, you can follow me on Twitter at RobletOFire, ROBLETO and basically, guys, look, if you got any spare time tonight, what I always like to ask of anybody's viewers is that take 5 minutes out of your day and read up on the effects of autism and specifically its effect on children, and so we can maybe help build a more educated, accepting, and rewarding life for our neurodiverse brothers and sisters out there. So just be kind. But other than that, guys, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure, Robbie. Everybody should be following Robbie's Twitter, and should also check out his Politify, his newsletter. Like it's quick reads, and it's definitely worth it. It adds evidence to back up what we believe in, what we claim, and we try to make other people see about how these politicians are all corrupt and how electoral politics doesn't work. This is not going to fix our problems. And, like what we were just discussing here based off of Robbie's work, this bolsters your argument Robbie's here to bolster your arguments. All right, Robbie, thank you very much for coming on again. And everybody else, don't forget to stay informed.